All right, it's 9:30. I'll call the meeting to order. First item of business is approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion for that, please? The agenda. What? Motion, second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Second item, approval of the February minutes. And may I have a motion for that, please?
Move adoption.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll ask all in favor of adopting the minutes.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Third item of business is consider the April meeting date that had conflicts with both the plant. I guess Gunner's got that, so go ahead.
Yeah, a quick housekeeping item at last month's meeting, it was brought up that there were several conflicts for the scheduled meeting on April 3rd. We did a doodle poll. It was an overwhelming favorite for April 10 as the preferred makeup date. So because we adopt our calendar, we ask that you adopt a revised calendar, moving the April 3rd date to April 10th. Staff recommends approval.
Move. That's a motion.
I'll need a second. Second. Any discussion on this? What's happening with the 10th? Right. Hearing none, I'll ask everyone in favor of moving the meeting, April meeting to the 10th. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Item number 5, Marcus has an update on the Comprehensive Safety Act.
Thank you. So as discussed last time, we have the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. It's gone through a review. Tool design, the consulting team has gone through and made updates. So here's just a quick list of updates since the last meeting. We held the open house. You can see the boards behind you. The survey has been made available and is online. The body of the plan has been updated with edits as well as been put into InDesign. Some crash analysis items were updated and included in the appendix. Appendix E for countermeasures was updated. Appendix F for community projects was also updated. And then we have some additional items on next steps for the grant application. So we're just going to kind of walk through some of these changes. So the open house, we had 12-ish attendees. Thank you to the TTC members who attended. The presentations on the website. You can see that we got quite a bit of good feedback on potential priority projects and countermeasures that were seen as favorable. The survey is also on the project website. It has a similar setup to the countermeasure boards that you see around the room. The results we merged with the boards so we had to have a good understanding of the support for the countermeasures as well as the projects. That's going to be available through March 16th, and a press release has been issued. Gunner, right? Okay. Yep. And then we just ask that, the communities continue to post about on social media about the survey so that we continue to get good feedback.
Okay. I need
still more. It's just as slow.
Oh, you don't. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so changes to the main body. It was transferred into InDesign. The links were added in the table of contents. Graphics have been updated. And then some other edits were included on various pages. The changes that were made to the crash analysis, the key findings was edited just for clarify kind of what that meant to saying larger roads. The miles for the high injury network were calculated and added in there so that we know how many miles of roadway fit within each of those categories. Methodology for the high injury network analysis was also clarified. The caveat was added for safety improvements that have already potentially been completed because we're using older crash data. We also aligned the high entry network and the high risk network categories so that they're critical, high, and medium. And then we've added all maps for all the communities showing the high entry and high risk network nations. For the countermeasure toolkit, it's been transferred into InDesign. The table of contents has been updated. The countermeasures have been numbered, and these graphics have been updated with countermeasures. And these graphics correspond to the numbered items in the countermeasure tables. So as you flip through, you can kind of see how those would look in a graphical form. Those are the edits to that. Appendix F is where a lot of changes were made. Countermeasure table was adjusted for each project, consolidate categories. So instead of having each of those individual countermeasures, we list the 4 major categories, which we'll show you on the next slide. The high entry street profile types was removed. So this was in the tables. It had a special an item that was clarified that was like, this is a transition zone to rural. Those didn't really have a clear connection to anything else in the plan, so those were removed. Project errors in the table and maps were resolved. Street names are now local and then federal and state designations, and then headings were added to all the tables. So this is what the table looks like for countermeasures. So you'll see the project number, the corridor name, the length, the prioritization score, the priority tier, and then how those 4 categories fit into it. So not all categories have all 4 of those countermeasure options. And then there's an additional category that's other with other special recommendations. So that kind of completes the conversation around the draft plan and getting it to its final state. We would recommend approval of the plan. But before we do that, I think I'll just cover the grant item so that we can do all questions all at one time. So for the grant next steps, we're working on compiling feedback from our public open house and the survey and get a good idea of preferred projects, countermeasures. We'll also seek input from communities on which projects you all want to prioritize based off the projects that you submitted. And then we'll return to TTC after conversation with each of the communities with recommendations for what to include in the grant. So with that, happy to take any questions. I think again, we recommend approval of the plan.
What ended up being the total consultant cost for this? What was this, I guess, the amount spent? Do we know from an invoice standpoint or?
Do you have that number?
Yeah, I don't have the number offhand. It was what, $1 million grant. So all that went to consultant fees.
Their fee was $1 million.
Was it $1 million?
Well, it was
800,000.
800,000 in the grant funds, and then 200 match. 200,000 match, so it was $1 million for the contract.
But yeah, that was what the grant was, but the consultant agreement was $1 million too. Okay.
And I don't know how much of that has been expensed or reimbursed yet.
That's what I was kind of curious on.
Yeah, I could get that number for you. I don't have it off.
Just curious. Yeah.
But there was capacity.
Okay. I guess the one question I have, we've got this plan, it's to this certain point. It's going to be used to a certain degree to check off the box for safe streets for all grants. But what are we going to do beyond that? How are we going to track things? And I guess one of the things that I kind of see that might be a little bit missing is that in other plans, and maybe this is the difference with the regional plan, and I apologize for not maybe bringing this forward earlier, but you saw, as we see in the Des Moines plan, we have a checklist. We have essentially tasks. These are things we're going to do under each of our focus areas. We're going to try to do this in this year or this year. We program out these various tasks that are going to execute or implement the plan. And that's one thing I'm not seeing here. And I'm wondering, is that the difference because it's a regional plan? And then it's really it's really an analysis of our safety condition. And now it's up to the member agencies to take that information and then develop how they're going to implement their plan. But there are things that are regional level that we need to, and the closest that I notice is in where we talk about the various policy aspects. We have some things we want to do and tasks, but it's not really showing any timelines. And that's a concern of mine, that is this plan just going to sit on the shelf or sit in a virtual shelf, and we're only going to use it for hopefully 1 or 2 cycles for grants. I don't know who could best answer that.
I'm happy to take a stab at it. I think you're right. There's not a checklist of like, here's what we do first, set up a committee to focus on this. Here's a staff position that you could hire. It does go back to those non-infrastructure countermeasures. It's kind of what falls back to the MPO staff. How do we work on these items, encourage communities to also, adopt or support those specific policies. And then a lot of the projects have to come from the community level. So hopefully this is used instead of saying, Des Moines, you have your plan. Now Johnston and Grimes and Waukee all have their plans, so that they can look back at this and say, here are corridors that we can focus on. One of the recommendations for policy items is around SDVG scoring, and we've looked at it a little bit this year as to how does scoring compare if we go off our old scoring criteria where we look at crashes. So if the segment had a fatal or serious injury crash versus if it's on the high injury network, and just kind of how does that score comparatively. So those are things that we'll be trying to advance forward, is looking at how we can adopt the high injury network into some of those practices where we've just looked at crashes. Anything else to say?
No, that's what I was going to say, is there's a lot of it's going to be incumbent upon the communities. We will do our best to try to hold the communities accountable, provide data, provide tracking of all the data we've collected here. And then also the things that we can control, such as our funding. How do we make adjustments to that, or policy implication, policy adjustments to that, so that we are incentivizing and prioritizing safety going forward. There might be some, more procedural things, going back and amending our long range plan, stuff like that. That's kind of the work that we will be doing next. From there, if there's a desire to have more checklists, that's something we can look into.
Would there be like a dashboard with tracking the data, and would that be on? I know we have the page right now that's set up for the action plan that's in progress, but would there be like, when this is finalized, we have like a dashboard page that would track the data over time? And
yeah, so we currently have our crash performance measure dashboard that's aligned with the goals from the long range plan. This we're looking to update and incorporate some of those long range targets out to 2045, where we have 0 fatalities as the goal, and just get that updated so that it's showing crashes that are happening and how we're tracking toward that goal.
Marcus, this is Sean from Tool Design. Do you mind if I add something?
Yep, go for it.
So they looked at several other regional NPO plans, and a lot of them didn't actually include something like Appendix F, where you would have projects at a high, medium, and low rated category. So that's one of the things we did to try to help prioritize. We knew that was an important thing to accomplish for the member community. And it is a fine balance to walk here, because it's different than one community doing it, because we have 19 member communities here. And Appendix E, the countermeasures toolkit, is really geared as more of a menu that communities can use to pair with those high, medium, and low infrastructure projects. And then, like Marcus and Gunnar have been talking about, Chapter 7 and Chapter 8, those really get to the things that are under the NPO's control. What can they change policy-wise? And while they're not laid out year by year, we tried to keep those pretty cinched up and really focused on the MPO's realm and what they have control over.
Marcus, what's the timing of the individual community meetings to talk about priorities or preferred projects?
So it'll partially depend on when the NOFO gets released. We're still anticipating, based on the information that we have, that it'll happen before the end of the month here. We're gonna lead it off with like a quick online survey of just, fill out this form with some priorities. And so we can have some feedback, and then we'll reach out, probably, my guess is within the month. That's what we're hoping for, just so that we can be prepared for when that NOFO does get released.
There are any more comments or questions, either in the room or online? Okay, seeing none, staff recommends approval of the comprehensive safety action plan. Is there anybody who would like to make that motion? Or if we need some more discussion, we can have that too. I'll move. Right. Motion by Steve. Is there a second? I'll second. Been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the comprehensive safety action plan, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Item number 6 is the draft fiscal year 26 unified planning work program and budget. Dylan is taking that.
Yes, thank you. It's the time of year where we have to develop and then approve our work program and budget. This identifies all the work that the MPO will be doing over the next fiscal year. It really is supposed to justify and include all of the planning projects that are going to happen, even if they're from our member communities too. So while I'm thinking about that, if you have corridor studies, anything like that coming up, please let us know and we can document that in there. Right now, it's basically just START and MPO projects. So I'll plug that in. This is just a draft that we're approving today. This will go to the DOT, they'll get us comments back, and then we'll come back in May with the final, and that'll be the official thing that goes over to the DOT and sets, establishes our funding and the projects we're going to do for the next fiscal year. New this year, I think we mentioned this before, we've gone through some strategic planning work. On the table when you came in, I think it was linked in the agenda packet, is a kind of a 3-page document that shows what our strategic planning framework looks like. This was developed and approved by the policy committee last month. And that is, so there's been a little reorganization in our work program to base the projects that we're doing off of that strategic planning framework. That's going to look a little different if you're familiar with what we've done in the past. So if you go to the next slide, I don't know how well you'll be able to read this, maybe online better than in person, but in person, we've got the handouts for you. This is what our strategic planning framework looks like. It starts out with you can see those 4 pillars. The first one, MPO governance and operations, then regional planning and federal excellence, enhanced partnerships and services, and then finally purpose-driven projects. So we've categorized everything that we're going to do underneath one of those 4 pillars. So that consolidates stuff a little bit, but hopefully makes it a little more streamlined and strategic as we go forward. If you go to the next slide, you can see basically what I just said. We've got those 4 areas, and we are looking at this as staff as that's kind of the hierarchy of work. We want to make sure we have a good base of operations and our governance, the committees we work with, everything that's really solid. And there's a lot of time that goes into that. And then we go up a notch, make sure we take care of all the federal requirements, and all the funding and all the federal level stuff that we have. Apologize here. And then we have our partnerships and services. So these are things that aren't necessarily federally required, but they're things that our memberships are requesting. This is like providing data, doing the data bike, grant writing, grant assistance, those sort of things. Again, not federally required, but they provide a service for the dues that our members are paying to us. And then finally, purpose-driven innovation. These are, how do we be innovative? How do we be kind of on the cutting edge? So you'll see in that strategic framework, if you're looking at it, there's something in there we call wildly important projects. These are the things that pop up every handful of years, think water trails or transload or these big regional kind of audacious things that the MPO will take on. We can't do them all the time, but when they present themselves, we want to be flexible and have the opportunity to do this. That being said, the next couple slides here, we have for you a breakdown of what kind of projects you'll see within the work program, again, by these 4 categories. So governance and operations, this is really making sure we're doing the grant administration for the operation of the MPO, hosting committee meetings like this, making sure we have good financials, audit, all those kind of things. The next one is really where we do bulk of the work. That is the regional planning and federal excellence. So again, awarding the SDG, TAP, CRP funds, making sure we do the TIP, maintain the long range plan. Again, all of those federally required work elements. There's a few things in there that aren't necessarily federally required, but they fit in that core transportation element, such as a freight plan, active transportation plan. That's something that we're starting to work on as well. And then DARTS projects fit in there too. Go to the third one. Again, these are more services we provide. So one is just, this is in the strategic framework, is improving how we provide access to services and making sure that you are all aware of the services we can provide to you. So that's one of the projects we'll be taking on. Again, all of the pavement, both roadway and trail pavement analysis forecasting, making data available to you, whether that's data we collect, someone else collects, or that we subscribe to, such as our streetlight agreement we have now. Again, grant assistance, and then all of like the media relations, public involvement, those kind of things that help support the organization and the work that we do. And then finally, you go to that third one of the purpose-driven projects. Again, there's not a ton of here because this is kind of that peak. We don't spend a lot of time here, but we want to make sure that they're important things. So Future 435, for example, is one of those big things that we've been working on for a while. Passenger rail feasibility study. This is that line that goes to Grimes that we've kind of been kicking around. The multimodal economic impact study. This is something that will be starting here very soon. Peer collaboration. This is just making sure that we are aware of what other MPOs and similar organizations are doing so that we're aware of best practices with the goal of making sure that we're doing the best to our abilities. And then just embracing emerging technology. Things are changing all the time, both in terms of the data that we can use, but also things like autonomous vehicles that are going to be coming to our region and making sure we are prepared for that. I think that's it as far as the actual work program. Something going back to the strategic plan that we want to make sure you're aware of. Again, on the table when you came in, and this was also in the agenda packet, the work of the strategic planning isn't done yet. We've got that strategic planning framework, but now we're focusing on reviewing the MPO's mission, vision, goals, or mission, vision, goals, and principles. We're asking for feedback by Monday. There's a link in the agenda packet to the survey that we want you to fill out. If you're here in the room, you can fill that out right here on the piece of paper and leave it if you want to. But we really just want to get a good sense of what does everyone think about the MPO's mission vision? We don't necessarily need to totally recraft them, but there might be some tweaks that go into that. And guiding principles is something we've never had. So this is kind of a new area for us, but I think will be important. I will say that we asked everyone to do the SWOT analysis last time, and the way that data was collected, they separated it out by what did policy committee say, what did tech committee say, what did staff say, and that resonates with the policy committee when they see the input from the different voices. So I would encourage you to take a look at that, provide your voice, provide your feedback, make your voice heard. Moving on from here, we're collecting that kind of information now in March. In April, that will come back to the strategic planning committee, which our chair John is on, from representing the tech committee. So you do have a voice there as well. And then that'll go before the policy committee in April to be adopted. So all of this will be final wrapped up in April as far as the strategic planning. So now we're kind of covering two things there for the work program as well as the strategic planning framework, but they kind of go together. If there's any questions about any of that, happy to take them. Otherwise, again, we'd ask for your approval on the draft of the work program so we can get that to the DOT, but there is still time to get projects in and make adjustments to that as well. So I'll stop talking and see if there's any feedback or questions.
Fairly quiet, so I'll assume no one has any feedback at this time. I would encourage everyone to jump into the survey that's online. It takes maybe 5-10 minutes, but please do that for Monday. It does help. Seeing that, staff recommends approval of the draft fiscal year 26 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget. Is there a motion for such approval?
I'll make the motion.
Motion, is there a second? Nick, Joaquin, been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Next item is the regional trails, item number 7, regional trail counter program expansion. Carl Saxton has this item.
Yes, thank you. So this was brought to you last month as an introduction, and staff has been working on this proposal and would like your approval today. So as a reminder, our regional trail counter program is tracks the trail usage on our regional significant trails. Those trails are determined by the Bicycle Pedestrian Roundtable. And currently we have 7 trail counters out there currently, and staff is proposing to add 10 new counters. I'll go over those locations with you here. Last month we brought to you a few more counters in this, but we have a new proposal that we have before you. So new trail counter locations are 73rd and Walnut Creek, on the Clyde Greenbelt Trail at 73rd Street, the Norwalk Trail just off the Great Western Trail, American Discovery Trail, Raccoon River Valley Trail on the southern leg of that. We have a trail counter on the northern leg as well. On the Chautauqua Valley Trail at northeast 112th Street, the Somerset Trail at Carlisle, the Great Western Trail at Park Avenue, the Neil Smith Trail, and then the Trestle Trail at Madrid. In addition to those 10 new trail counter locations, the Bicycle Pedestrian Roundtable recommended that we use a big data solution to supplement the physical counter location. And staff proposes to procure City Data AI. This provider will allow us to have trail usage data and also park usage data, so we can create an unlimited number of geofenced zones in your jurisdictions for whatever you may want to use them for, and will provide us with usage data and heat maps, demographic data about the users of those areas. And this will be at a cost of about $20,000 annually. So a little bit of a look about what you'll see from that big data provider is uses data by day, time of day, and location. So heat maps about where people are going on our trails and in your parks. And it's some demographic data. So you can see who's using the trail, age, ranges, socioeconomics about those users. More about who the people are that are using our trails. So with this, we think that we can reduce the number of physical counters, which are rather expensive, with a more low-cost solution to get us more data, but also using our physical counters to verify those counts. So with that, staff is seeking your approval. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is the crowdsourced data application, can that work in an urban, a high urban environment? Like for example, the trails that we have downtown Des Moines that parallel the Des Moines River. You know, can that be used in that sense?
I believe so. I think from what we've gathered, the software is being used by cities like San Jose. It's used by a lot of, it's used by the Iowa DNR, as you see, National Park Service. So like those are more probably rural areas. But it is also used by we were given the example of San Jose, which has a robust trail network as well. And they since stopped using physical counters. I think they're happy with what they're seeing from the big data provider. So we also are looking to enter this contract for a year to kind of test it out. So I think we'll try and gather more confidence in that with by pairing it with our physical counters, so we can kind of see is this something that is adequately meeting our data.
That's good. I'd make a motion to approve if there's no other.
I have one other question here. We'll take your motion, John. If the community wants to purchase one of the data counters for use in one of their own parks, can we piggyback on the subscription, or do you know how that works?
Subscription of the big data provider.
Yes.
So you get unlimited number of zones. So you are in this subscription. So all of our member jurisdictions will have access to it.
Okay, so member community could add their own data in.
Yes, absolutely. So every member community will have a login to create their own zones. The MPO will be doing it for the regional trail network. And then every member jurisdiction can make as many zones as they want to do their local trails, their parks, any zone that they really want. So if they're having a farmer's market and want to see uses for that, you can create a zone where your farmer's market is and see who's coming, where they're coming from. So it has a wide variety of uses. I think the MPO's use case is more for the regional trails, but there's also added bonus for jurisdictions to use however they want.
Were you asking about physical counters?
Yeah, like if I wanted to buy a physical counter or a physical data collector and then plug it into this subscription.
We're taking one motion here, but we're actually doing two transactions, right? But the physical counters, we would be going to add them.
Okay.
So if you want to add physical counters, just reach out to staff. Communicate on price.
Okay, perfect.
I guess I was curious, and maybe this was covered at a previous meeting. I'm new, so forgive me. The data subscription, how do they gather their data? Is it off of cell phone information?
It's cell phone data that they use. They gave us the 10,000 sources for that data. So they use third-party apps. So you're willingly giving your geo-based data to those apps, and then they're in turn taking that. There's no unique identifier, so no one can say I was at that park, but they'll have general based information about who those users were.
And you mentioned member communities could take advantage. Is this something where you mentioned the geofence as well? Would you need to determine your area ahead of time, or would you be able to, if you had an event, go days later and see what the data was?
No, so you could add the geofence at any time. We get 3 years of historical data with this, so you can go back 3 years from whenever that event took place and still get that data.
Sure. I was just wondering, as part of our agreement with the partnership, we have limited access to Placer AI, which I think is similar.
Yeah, which we looked at them as well for this use case, but thought that city data was more met our needs.
Okay, thank you. Earl, I was going to ask, kind of based on the questions, do these two applications work together?
Yes, city data told us that we can import our counts to kind of verify their counts, so they can pull them at they're used to working with eco counter already, so they're pretty well versed in the counters that we currently use and can incorporate them into their software.
Or any more discussion, either here or online? Yeah, I still need a second. John Davis will make the motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of the expansion of the regional trail counter program and city data AI subscription data subscription. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Carl. It looks like you have the next item as well. Item number 8, request for updated trail data and updated trail and sidewalk data.
So as Dylan alluded to, staff is starting to kick off an update on our active transportation plan. The previous plan is the Connect plan, which was implemented in 2009. Staff is asking member jurisdictions to begin to update their sidewalk and trail GIS data so that we can perform a level of service analysis for both the bicycle network and pedestrian networks. We're looking to, we also use this data for our data bike data collection, which kicks off in May. So that's why we're asking you to have this completed by May 2nd, as we look to bring in an intern to start our data bike collection shortly thereafter. And we're also planning to do that analysis of our level of service for both those networks. So just asking you to get that, start getting that data updated for any new roads, like sidewalks, trails that you've been putting in. So perform that analysis.
Questions for Carl?
Has this been worked on at the PED roundtable, PED bicycle roundtable too, or like, are they all aware of this?
They will be made aware of this at the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
What format should the updates be? Is it GIS data or how do you receive it?
So we have a standard GIS like classifications and everything on our website. But there's a manual for how that data should be input.
Any further questions, discussion? Not, that's the discussion item. We'll move on to the next item. Thanks, Carl. Item number 9, discussion on the draft DC list and gunner list.
So every time of year where we're prepping for the partnership trip out to DC, May 7 through 9 this year. And we had this item before you last year, and on the email afterwards, we sent out a link. We're directing you to a Google form. We invited you all to make updates to the projects. We used our list from last year as a starting point. I know several of you have made updates. I've heard from a couple of you by email. Today we have the updated draft before you. And this is really just to give you the opportunity to say if something got missed, something needs to be added, etc. We have printed copies at the table here. We would just ask that you take a look at that, and if there's any other updates, we'll make them. We're going to treat this as a living document, and any changes that we need to make can be made prior to the trip. The real purpose of this is to make sure that we know who's asking for what under what program, so that when we're in the room with our congressional delegation, we can say these projects are important to the region. That's what it comes down to. Any questions?
I think the important thing there is, while it's good to know what your priorities are, we're really looking for ones that are actively seeking funding. So whether that's an earmark, congressionally directed funding, or discretionary grant, those are the ones that really help us when we're in the room there.
There's no further questions. It's just an informational item, so thank you, John. Item number 10, legislative update by.
Thank you. We've got a couple different legislative issues here. Some are state, some are local, or some are federal, I should say. First one, Future 435. There's actually a bill being considered right at the moment. It might be over with in the Senate. The bill has been introduced in both the House and the Senate that would provide the interstate designation and speed exemption, as well as provide $250,000 towards an alternative analysis. Any updates yet from that?
I just texted Ryan. On the Senate side, the bill is going through Commerce Committee first, and then it's going to go to Appropriations. And the Commerce Committee started their meeting this morning at 9:30. I'm texting with Ryan right now, and they're caucusing. We anticipated passing out of the Commerce Committee today. Hopefully, I'll have an update by the end of the meeting. That's important because that makes it funnel proof, because it does appropriation. So once it's out of Commerce Committee, that's a really good positive sign.
So there's hopefully to come there. We go on to the next one. The sidewalk liability, there's a bill that aims to address recent Supreme Court rulings. I'm not an expert on this. I'm sure some of you are more aware of this than we are, but just want to make sure you're aware of that. Another item there was a proposal to amend the constitutional provision of the IWIL program, and the program hasn't been funded, but it's there as a mechanism. This would basically change it to say instead of funding parks and trails and all the outdoor stuff, would be used to fund schools. So while that's a good thing for our purposes of having a source of funding for trails and outdoor recreation, that would be a loss. So just making that aware. Finally, I think this is the last state issue we have, SUDAS. There's a bill related to SUDAS, and I know Mark Wheeler's on the phone, and maybe because some of you, again, might know more about this than we do. But this would, and the way it's worded, I just put the way it's worded up there, require the Iowa DOT to ensure equal representation from governmental and non-governmental entities. There's a few issues with that, which is that SUDAS is not a governmental entity. It's a private nonprofit, but it is funded by the Iowa DOT. Essentially, what seems to be happening is there's some developers and development groups, such as the home builders, general contractors, and so forth, who want to have an opportunity to change those requirements. And it appears they want to reduce the requirements, which could have a lot of issues. Obviously, substandard construction, which reduces life cycle costs, which puts more taxpayer burden out there. Again, I don't want to put Mark on the spot, but if you have any updates or anything you want to add to this, or if anybody does who's participated in that, please feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, so the SUDAS Board of Directors sent a memo to the DOT's legislative liaison on February 25th. And then we sent a similar memo to the Senate Transportation Committee members on just this past Monday, March 3rd. Just basically a informational memo on, basically what SUDAS is and the fact that it's really individual cities and communities, they have the prerogative to, adopt it or not. The development community has been invited in the past to participate in the process or comment on things. And so, we basically have the board has stated the position of where we're at, and so I don't know where this is going to go, but I think we've done what we can.
I guess I would ask from the communities here if this is something the MPO should register against or at least helping speak out on. Please let us know. My sense is that this wouldn't be good if it were to happen, but I don't want to overstep either.
Right. Yeah, I think the MPO should chime in and not support this. It really, to me, it downgrades or potentially downgrades the standards that we use for design and construction.
I agree with you, Mark. I personally be in favor of the MPO if the policy board agrees adopting the stance against this legislation. I had one question, and I don't know the answer, so maybe it's too early. But previously, before the DOT funded this through an off the top of the road use tax fund, this was paid for by all the 9 MPOs and 18 RPAs, and there's assessment was sent out every year and it got paid that way. Is there any thought if this passes that maybe, I think it'd be hard to collect the RPAs, but maybe the MPOs all fund SUDAS individually again? And again, that's a policy board question, but to me, it feels like it's a relevant transportation related activity. I think we can get support for.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a potential. I haven't heard of any conversation about that yet, but it would take the DOT's role ensuring that there's equal representation. I mean, they wouldn't really have a lever to enforce it until they come out about MPOs and RPAs potentially. Yes,
but we could, and then at that point we come up with some other plan. We just adopt the SUDAS standards as of today, and I don't know. So
I think it's important. This is Jeff. To be against it. I mean, I don't think they understand what SUDAS is. SUDAS is a standardized set of specifications created for communities to have similar type specs from community to community. If we're going to do anything, cities would probably start going back to that, which would be a bigger problem overall. I don't think that they understand that SUDAS is basically a smorgasbord of specifications. Each city has a supplemental spec to go with this as far as what the requirements are. I don't know where they're going, what they're trying to do, but it's not a good bill.
Thank you. That gives us direction on where to go. And we have a meeting with the executive committee after this. So we'll definitely bring this up and let them know what your thoughts are. If we want to move on to the next ones, I think this gets into more of the federal updates. And as you're probably aware, there's been a slew of executive orders over the last 2 months or so. It's very confusing because they get issued, then they get rescinded, or they get changed, or they get stayed by a federal judge, or what have you. But this is what we know so far. STIP and TIP amendments. This was kind of a big deal a couple of weeks ago that there was notice let out that anything that had to be approved by the federal highway Iowa office in this case had to go to DC first to get their approval, which could really slow down the process. That has since been rescinded, which means that right now, anyway, TIP amendments, work program amendments, anything basically requiring signature from the division office can be done still at the division. Unless I'm looking at Shelby. If you know anything different, please let me know. But that's what we've heard from our groups. One caveat to that is the Federal Highway Office, at least here in Iowa, is very short-staffed. So it might still take them a little while to get through some of these things because they've lost some people and there's a hiring freeze. So they're doing what they can, but that's what we know there. Reimbursements for the MPO as well as our grant programs are continuing to fund and to flow right now. The Safe Streets for All program was delayed for about a month. We had to just, pay the bill still, but not get the funding back from the feds. That has since started up again, so that's good. And currently everything is proceeding as normal. The other big one that we have out there is the water trails. That was funded under Trump's previous administration, so we've been told that's probably not likely to get pulled or stopped or anything, just because it essentially was a priority from the previous administration, his previous administration. The one big thing that we see that could be impacted here are carbon reduction funds. We've had conversations with Iowa DOT as well as Federal Highway, and they have said that right now everything is still authorized, obligated, continue to program it. However, just reading the writing on the wall there, with the Green New Deal opposition and the Unleashing American Energy executive order, anything like that is probably not going to continue, especially beyond the authorization bill as it is today. We have awarded some funding into an out year from the authorization bill. So assuming that happens, we will probably have to rescind some of the money that the MPO has allocated to a couple of projects. So we're working to figure out how do we maneuver that internally, but we're still working on what that looks like. If you go on, there's a few other things to touch on. We currently we're working under a continuing resolution that will expire at the end of next week. What we've been told, again, through we're members of AMPO, the Association of MPOs, National Association of Regional Councils, organizations like that. The House and Senate leadership are pushing for what they call a clean extension through the end of September, which would be the end of this fiscal year. And what that would mean is just continuing funding levels as they are, which would be more than what the administration is asking. So essentially what they're doing is trying to kick the can down the road and say, let's continue doing this for the next 6 months or so. That in turn would give us more time and everyone around the country more time to justify the use, the current funding levels, the current funding programs and so forth. Hopefully there won't be big drastic changes sooner. This might get to 6 months or so. So that's kind of where those things are right now. If you go on, I think we showed you this last time, just kind of a quick assessment of where we see funding programs. I just basically covered that with the carbon reduction funding being the main one that we see unlikely, likely to be impacted, unlikely to align with the administration's priorities. And I think there might be one more. A few things that we're doing to be a little proactive. In the work program that we just approved the draft of, we made sure that there were no buzzwords that the administration has said they don't want us here. That was some unofficial advice we got from Federal Highway. So we made sure to follow that. Like I said, we've been doing calls with other MPOs through some national organizations to get an understanding of what impacts are and what best practices are. One of the best practices that we've heard is for consulting contracts that we have going forward is to make sure that there are clauses in there that say you can get out of this if funding is rescinded, reduced, whatever it might be, so that we're not obligated to pay a consultant when we don't have the funding to pay for them anymore. Hopefully we don't come to that, but just to be proactive and safe. Like I mentioned, the carbon reduction program, we're doing some work there, trying to see if we can move funds forward a little bit, just get them spent before anything would be clawed back. We also are looking at different budget scenarios. So worst case, funding gets cut, whether that's through a continued resolution change or just because the administration cuts funding, what's this impact going to be, and making sure that we can be on top of that and nimble when it comes to those kind of things. We have a very, very healthy reserve, a balance for the MPO's operations. So we could get through things for a while, and hopefully it doesn't come to that, but those are some things on top of mind that we're looking at. I think that's what I have for you as far as legislative update. If there's questions, comments, anything else you're hearing, either what we touched on or something else, please let us know. Happy to make sure we're doing our best to communicate with you and ask likewise that you're sharing with us what you're hearing.
Just one other note, there is Bill 1168 that's basically out there to essentially kill CM at risk. So they when I say kill it says CM the amendment will say that your project needs to be above 150 million. Well, we don't do probably, I mean, maybe universities, building Jack Trice Stadium or something, but so yeah, it essentially would kill it. So we've obviously opposed it, and I've met with senators to talk about it, but
Do you know who that's being? That's not sponsored by Master Builders, is it?
oh no, Master Build is not. No, there's only one entity behind it. It's like something like fair bidding. I've never heard of them before. Something fair bidding practices, and I think it's got the same goofball that's behind the SUDA stuff that's hates managing stormwater and stuff. So sadly, he's from my hometown, so I'm embarrassed by it. But
Yeah, we'll put that on our list of things to watch out.
Thanks, Steve. Does anybody have any other comments, questions, concerns they want to talk about legislation? Right. Please talk to your elected leaders.
And hopefully this is a topic, it's not fun to have to talk about some of those things, but we haven't traditionally talked about it with the tech committee, and hopefully you're okay with talking about it. I think you are on the ground more and hear the impacts and understand those. So that's why we're bringing it to you, and we can help feed that up the chain if it works.
Thanks, Dylan. We appreciate it. Item number 11, the federal fiscal year 26 through 29 Transportation Improvement Program Development, Addison Williamson, SS.
All right, good morning, everyone. I have a brief report and a upcoming request related to the Transportation Improvement Program development. So March sets off the development of the 4-year TIP, the annual development of the TIP. And so the MPO will be working with member governments and agencies to review and update, providing the updates to items, projects that are currently programmed into the TIP. So federally funded federal fiscal year 2025 projects, those must have federal authorization to proceed by September 30th. Otherwise, they'll roll over into federal fiscal year 2026. So you can expect to see within few weeks, TIP status reports will be sent out, and we'll be requesting updates from member jurisdictions and agencies related to that. I'll go to the next slide quickly just to show an overview of what the development process looks like, and then I can take any questions. So the schedule, like I said, March, we began by reviewing current TIP projects. In April, we'll update the TIP project list. That'll bring us to May, where we'll review the draft of the next TIP. In June, that draft TIP will be sent to Iowa DOT, and the MPO will be hosting its public input meeting. And then in July, we'll have the final review of the TIP and submission to Iowa DOT. Happy to take any questions related to that.
Hearing no questions, thank you, Addison. Item number 12, MPO certification review. Dylan has this one.
Thank you. Just a quick update here. The MPO will have its quadrennial, so every 4-year certification review. That'll happen on April 1st and 2nd. There are some opportunities in that certification review for you to put your voice and make your voice be heard. There will be a survey. The survey is linked in the agenda packet. That'll be open past the certification review up till April 11th to comment on the MPO's performance and anything that the federal review team needs to know about. There will also be a public input meeting at the actual certification review on April 1st from 11 to noon. If you would like to participate in either one of those, we would very much encourage it. I don't think we often get a lot of participants from the public or anybody. So we're really trying to make a case that, hey, we're hopefully in your eyes doing a pretty good job, and let the review team know that. I'll also say, back to previous comments on legislature or legislative update, the review happens, and it's the people that review us are representatives from Federal Highway, Federal Transit, and the Iowa DOT. As I mentioned, Federal Highway is down a few people. So we're going to have some just random people from US DOT headquarters doing this that probably aren't familiar with the MPO. I don't know if that's going to be a negative or not, but this is another opportunity or another reason why, maybe make your voice heard so that, we don't have any issues with that review team. So it'll be an interesting process. I'm sure they'll have a lot of things that they can't tell us about what's going on, or maybe they want to tell us, but they just cannot. But hopefully we'll learn more during that process, spending a couple of days with these federal folks and what they're doing too. Anyway, those links are in the agenda packet. I appreciate your consideration of it.
Thank you, Dylan. And if you haven't already put it April 1st on your calendar, come down for the public meeting. I encourage you to do so. Local federal folks are our friends. I don't know about what we'll get from DC, US DOT. So good point. Last item 13K, report on upcoming regional events. Addison Williamson has this. Or did we not do this one?
It's just there in the packet for
No,
your.
there it is. Okay, we don't have to go down. Any other non-action items of interest to the committee?
Oh, great. Go ahead.
I was just gonna add on to, there is as far as upcoming events, in June, ASHTO's Committee on Traffic Engineering will be meeting here in Des Moines, as well as the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Those two entities always pair together. So really, the week of June 8th through the 13th, those meetings will be held. June 11th through the 13th is the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So if you want to view how the sausage is made of the manual and uniform traffic control devices, you can spend whatever amount of time you want doing that, and you can register, and they do accept guests. Or if you want to think you might like to be involved at some point with the National Committee on some of their technical groups, you can observe those and then figure out which ones you want. The other aspect, we've been contacted by some of the individuals that will be in attendance to help identify potential walking tour locations or technical tours. So we've been contacted by an individual from NATCO, as well as an individual from, I think she sits on the pedestrian bicycle committee. I'm not exactly sure the name, that handles that element of the manual to set up a bike tour or help suggest areas. So again, if anyone would like to be involved or has ideas, you certainly filter those through me. But this is you'll have representations from every state in the union, as well as the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, because they're all part of ASHTO. And so it'll be kind of a big thing. If you have interest or free time or have nothing better to do.
Thanks. Real briefly, for those of you who have applications in for Surface Transportation Block Grant funding this cycle, that meeting is coming up next week. You'll be getting information here from me soon on a schedule. We're basically going to slot 5 minutes per project, and we'll do it in alphabetical order by jurisdiction. But you'll get that run of show from me shortly. So just want to let you know that's coming up, and we provide you information ahead of time.
Anybody have any other items to discuss, interest, otherwise?
Say Gunner, this is Mark Miller. When do you need the presentations for the SDBG funding?
I haven't thought that through yet, but if I could have it a couple days ahead of time, so maybe the end of day Monday would be good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, our next meeting is April 10th at 9:30 a.m. We need a motion to adjourn or not? All right, we'll just adjourn. Thank you.